Hello and welcome to your lecture on modernization and technology. Grab your student notes and use them to follow along and fill in any blanks that you missed in class. The late 1800s and early 1900s were an exciting period of time in which to live. This time period was brimming with new inventions that changed people's lives. Many of these inventions will be very familiar to you, like the electric light. Patented in 1879, electric lights provided a bright and non-flammable way to keep shops and homes well lit after dark. You can't have a 24/7 Walmart without electric lights. And so I'd like you to picture yourself in a comfortable home at the turn of the century. It's 8 p.m., dark outside, but inside you can see just fine thanks to your electric lights. You'd love to talk to your favorite cousin, but she lives all the way across town. Thankfully, you have a telephone. Patented in 1876, the telephone enabled people to talk to each other over long distances. Suddenly, that distant cousin doesn't seem nearly so distant after all. So you call up your cousin and you have a wonderful conversation. You're so excited you invite her to come over tomorrow. Wait a minute. Tomorrow? But there's so much to do. And in the era before modern appliances, chores take ages because you have to do them all by hand. Luckily, you live in the era of modern appliances. Most of the appliances that we use and love today were invented during this time period. Modern appliances like the electric refrigerator, 1899, and the electric washing machine, 1910, made people's lives safer and easier. Safer because if you have a refrigerator in which to keep your food at a cool and consistent temperature, it'll spoil less quickly and you won't get sick and vomit all over your friend. And easier because think about it. Would you rather spend 8 hours a week scrubbing clothes down by the river, or get your arms all sore cranking your washing machine? Or would you rather push a button on your electric washing machine to start your load of laundry and then push that same button again when it's done to stop it? I'll take the electric washing machine. So it's tomorrow, and your friend has come over in her horse-drawn buggy. You smile and invite her to take a ride in your new car. Cars, patented in 1886, were first of all Benzes, but most people ended up owning a Model T Ford. It was the most affordable model of car, and many middle-class families had one. Cars were fast. A horse-drawn buggy can go maybe 5 to 8 miles an hour. A Model T Ford, when going downhill with a nice wind behind it, can get up to 45 miles an hour. Now that is fast. Cars aren't just fast, though. They have another benefit as well. I'd like you to picture a city without cars, full of horses pulling carriages. Horses leave manure. And so you have these streets that are stinking with filth, and there are street sweepers, and they're doing their best to clean up after all of these horses, but it's an uphill battle. The more popular cars get, the more of them there are on the streets, the more certain you can be that that brown stuff you're driving through is just mud. All of these inventions, electric lights, telephones, washing machines, refrigerators, cars, are all really, really exciting. But of course, I've saved the best two for last. Morse code was created in 1838, a lot earlier than the other inventions we've been discussing, by a man named Samuel Morse and his friend Alfred Vail. Morse code worked by replacing letters and the numbers 0 through 9 with dots or dashes. So for example, the letter S became ... and the letter O ... just like that. Interesting, right? But perhaps not that useful. Until you realize that Samuel Morse created Morse code to go with his earlier 1837 invention, the telegraph. The telegraph was a machine that used electricity and electromagnets to send electrical pulses over a wire or cable. These pulses could be long or short. Again, really interesting, but where's the practicality? The practicality, my friend, comes when you realize that short electrical pulses can become dots, and long electrical pulses dashes. All of a sudden, the telegraph becomes a way to send coded messages. It enables communication in real time over long distances. At first, you needed wires or cables in order to send those electrical pulses. And as you can imagine, people were laying telegraph cables all over the United States so they could talk to each other. They even took a really big telegraph cable and they laid it 2 miles deep across the entire Atlantic Ocean so that the United States could talk to Europe. But it wasn't long before telegraphs became wireless. And the wireless telegraph, which uses radio waves to send those coded messages, is actually the father of our modern radio. The effects of the telegraph and Morse code on the world were electrifying. It used to take days or even weeks for news and personal messages to travel. Now, if a big event happened in Europe, you could read about it the next day in your morning paper. If you had a family crisis, you could send a telegraph to your friends and family and know that they would get the information in a couple hours instead of the couple days it might take with a letter. So news and personal messages are traveling much more quickly, and that's great news for everyone, and especially great news for people on ships. It used to be that if a ship got into trouble on the high seas, it was sunk. Now, the ship could simply use its telegraph to send out a cry for help. In fact, the most famous of all Morse code, SOS, dot 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 dash 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 dot dot dot, was most commonly associated with ships calling out for someone to come and aid them in their time of need. The third and most complicated effect of Morse code in the telegraph was that it facilitated, that means made easier, widespread war. Basically, it made war waged over a great big area a lot easier. Why? Because one of the biggest obstacles in waging a big war over a big area is that it's really hard for those armies to communicate with each other, communicate with the government, and generally work together. With the telegraph, you can send instantaneous messages between armies and government, between spies and government, and it makes it a lot easier to coordinate and effectively wage a war over a big area. Morse code and the telegraph revolutionized communication. Our next invention revolutionized transportation. Mankind has always dreamed of flight. The Wright brothers made it a reality. Wilbur and Orville Wright, also known as the Wright brothers, invented the airplane. They were two close-knit brothers who owned a bicycle shop together, and their mechanical genius made sure that they fixed and built bicycles better than pretty much anyone else. Their talents extended far beyond bicycle repair, however. They were convinced that flight was possible, and they were also convinced that with enough study, hard work, and perseverance, they could achieve it. So, first, they hit the books. They studied everything that had been written about flight, from Leonardo da Vinci's drawings up to more modern attempts at flying machines. They built their own wind tunnel and tested 200 differently shaped wings until they found some that they thought might work. And they were right. On December 17th, 1903, they made the first flight in human history. Orville Wright flew from Kill Devil Hill in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. His flight lasted 12 seconds, and he was up 20 feet in the air. And to really get the full picture of this, I want you to imagine this plane. There's a wing down here like this, a wing up here like this, tail goes back like this, there's a rudder to steer, no cockpit, Orville Wright on his belly, on the wing, trying to steer with the rudder, flying 20 feet above the ground. Success! It had to be terrifying and exhilarating. After Wilbur and Orville Wright had convinced the world that they really had flown, that they weren't just making everything up, the airplane took off. And like many great inventions, such as the cotton gin, there were some unintended consequences. You see, Orville Wright hoped that the invention of the airplane would bring about world peace. Think about it. No one could do surprise attacks anymore. If you have a plane flying overhead, seeing everything that an army was doing, seeing where they are and how many people there are, surely it just becomes a useless exercise to try and wage war. Planes would bring about world peace. Or not. The unintended consequence of the airplane was that it became a prized and deadly tool of war. And on that cheerful note, and with your minds brimming full of all these wonderful inventions, we finish here today. See you next week.